بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال: إنا أمة أمية لا نكتب ولا نحسب، الشهر هكذا وهكذا، يعني مرة 29 ومرة 30، متفق عليه. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that verily we are a nation that is unlettered, ummi. لا نكتب ولا نحسب, we do not write, we do not calculate. The month, هكذا وهكذا, the month is either this or that, meaning it's either 29 or 30. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam ended the statement there. Obviously, the first explanation of this hadith is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talking about the months and its calculations, that we don't need to use our mind, keep it simple. We are a nation that does not depend on heavy education and calculation to determine the start and end of the month, especially the blessed month of Ramadan and the blessed month of the Hajj, because those are the months where our two of our main ibadas are connected to. So it's specifically talking about that keep things simple. If you sight the moon on the 29th, you start the new month, and if you don't sight it on the 29th, complete the 30 days. This is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is referring to, and I think we went into a little bit of detail in the previous sessions about how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam based it on simplicity. You go out and you look at it, and obviously there are certain things that the scholars have to come to an understanding that what would be acceptable, what would not be acceptable based on the Quran and the Hadith. But this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's instructions. You go out, you sight the moon, and if you see it, you start the new month. If you don't sight it, then you don't start the new month. And we do not depend on these calculations and other determinations as to why things should be the way they are. We are a very simple nation. This is the first meaning of the hadith. But obviously, it does raise a concern when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that we are an ummi nation, a nation that is unlettered, which obviously means, remember, there is a difference between unlettered and illiterate. So sometimes, I think the non-Muslims, to try to mock us or mock our Nabi, na'udhu billah, they say illiterate. Illiterate basically means a person who is ignorant, does not know anything, is backward, is barbaric, etc. Where unlettered just means that you do not know how to read and write. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there could not be anyone who was more educated than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there would not be anyone who would be more educated than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam till the day of judgment, and that's a guarantee. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam possessed the wahi that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealing to him. So even if we look at in any element, we would realize that any expert in any field, they would study the Quran and the Sunnah, and they would realize that they would find so many details of that field in the Quran and the Sunnah that they would not be able to find it probably in their own research. This is a fact. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not saying that we are to stay a nation that did not that does not read and write. If you look at Abu Bakr radiallahu an, Umar radiallahu an, Ali radiallahu an, Muawiyah radiallahu an, all of them, they were actually Katib al-Wahi. They actually wrote the Wahi. They actually knew how to read and write. So obviously, it's not talking about that. It's just talking about we are the Ummatin Ummiya for a Nabiyul Ummi. So just the way when we refer to that, that we are an unlettered nation for an unlettered Nabi. So we refer to that even in the previous scriptures. We refer to, amongst the ummis, the people who didn't learn how to read and write, there would be a Nabi that would come, and that would be the Nabi, that would be the Khatamun Nabiyyin. So they were known as that nation, and we, by extension of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Nabiyul Ummi, we became the nation that is Ummi. And the other thing, that many times we look at something that it's always understood in our culture as something negative. It's always taken as something negative. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mention about Nabi al-Ummi in so many different places to let us know that sometimes in our mind we might think of something as negative, but in reality it might not be negative. So for example, when we look at if a person says, I never went to any school, I never had any education, I didn't learn how to read or write. So you'll think, okay, subhanAllah, we don't know what type of person he is. But in reality, just because he didn't go to a traditional school does not mean that he or she is a backward person. Because if we know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being a Nabi al-Ummi, he changed the course of the world for generations to come. There's a very famous quote that that Nabi, which was an Ummi, exhausted authors for forever to come till the Day of Judgment. The authors, they start writing and they pick any topic. They said, okay, let's write about akhlaq, ethics. And then they start writing and writing and writing and writing. And then they write 5 books and then they still say, there's still so much to cover. Then they said, okay, let's start talking about, geography. Let's start talking about, cultures. Let's talk about anything, even the worldly aspects, not even the dini aspect. Just the worldly aspects, there's so much that they can derive from the Quran and the Hadith. And they realize that Nabi, that was unlettered, that was an Ummi, exhausted authors, all the way till the day of judgment to come. So this is something that we have to understand, that sometimes in our mind, something is negative, but it might not be negative. The last thing is that a lot of times we look at, when we want to accomplish something, there is a path that we draw towards that accomplishment. For example, if somebody thinks today that, I want to open up a business, the first thing he does, he will go to Google and he will start finding big structures, nice big stores, and he would find a marketing team and a website team and wallahu alam, all these other things. Somebody is looking to open up a school, they would find all the schools in Syria within the vicinity, etc. Because in our mind, there is a specific path. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has things completely different. Completely different. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something to happen, it will happen without the resources. And a lot of times I give the example, Musa alayhi salam, he was sent and he was told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this is going to be the Nabi that is going to defeat Fir'aun and give Bani Israel the freedom. But, if you looked at, Musa alayhi salam was already in the castle. All he had to do was just kill Fir'aun. He was sitting already next to him. He just kills him and he just sits on the throne. Khalas, everything is done. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's system is completely different. Not only that he was wanted for murder, he left for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, and then he came back. And now when he came back, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, this is the time and this is the way I want Musa alayhi salam to defeat Fir'aun, and this is the way I want Bani Israel to get their freedom. The system is different. Similarly, when we look at Rasul al-Nabi al-Ummi, that this Rasul who is an unlettered Nabi, you would think that what's the first thing? If somebody says, we want someone who's going to be the biggest doctor. You said, okay, let's find the best university, the best medical school. We want someone to be the best lawyer, let's find the best law school. So, because our mind has a specific pathway. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not follow that same path. And this is a great example of that even though a lot of times we might think that this is a way to gain success or this is the way to exercise certain things, it's in our mind. Allah is not dependent on that. So similarly, when we say, there is an imam, he said, does he give big lectures? So a lot of times, immediately they gear the success to your speaking ability. When we look at Musa alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam's dua was what? رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي. Ya Allah, remove this, this obstacle in my speech. Ya Allah, remove it, so that way, يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي, so they can understand me. He did not even speak properly. And Musa alayhi salam himself, he says, وَأَخِي هَارُونَ هُوَ أَفْصَحُ مِنِّي. Harun, my brother Harun, he is better in speaking than me. Right? So you would think that in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will just send Harun alayhi salam because he speaks better. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, I want you to go with that limitation. And then I want to show them that you will succeed. And this is something that we have to understand. Many times when it comes to serving the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing anything, we always feel that, oh, I'm not able to do it because I don't have this degree. I'm not able to do it because I don't speak well. I'm not able to do it because I don't write well. All of these obstacles, these are just excuses in our mind. If we really want to do something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it happen. We just have to put our mind and heart to it. And once the effort is there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it happen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to understand that, although we are the ummah that belongs to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was an ummi, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us more knowledge and more education than anyone to ever come, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the Quran and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the hadith. And this is the most useful and the most resourceful sources that we can ever find. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to understand this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to continue servicing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever capacity we can. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to understand and become a good source and a good resource for this ummah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta.